There is a place that is spoken about only in whispers. A dark area that spawns the beginnings of urban legends. A place where anything can happen and usually does. During the light of day, it hides just outside of view. But when the sun goes down, spirits, creatures of the night, roam free, and things do go bump in the night. It is in every state and every country, and there is no escaping it, no matter how safe you feel behind your locked doors and latched windows. So we invite you to turn down the lights and turn up your radio while we join Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, your hosts, on a journey into the darkness on the edge of town.
Good evening and welcome to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. Thank you for coming here and spending your Sunday nights with Tim and I. We appreciate having you being a part of our little world. Each week we're here with you to talk about the weird, the unexplained, the paranormal universe that seems to be surrounding us.
Oh, I thought you were going to say weird, unexplained, something to do with my single life.
No, that's completely explainable, Tim.
Oh.
It could be the fact that you like to dress up as members of Bay City Rollers and go out and lip sync on Sunday nights to...
Who doesn't?
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Keep it to ourselves.
All right.
Tim and I do have a cover band of Air Supply songs coming out this year.
It's called We're All Out of Love.
That's right.
Yeah,
All Out of Love.
The singles.
We've got a great show tonight. We're going to be talking to Stacey Jones, the ghost cop, and her son Jamie. We're going to be talking about a possession case that dealt directly with Stacey in her life. Hour two, we're going to be talking about 2013. Tonight is a night with the Joneses.
Hey.
Because we have Stacey Jones and Jamie on for the first hour. Second hour, we're going to be joined by Marie D. Jones, and she'll be talking to us about what to expect after the Mayan calendar runs out. 2013, Tim, that's a whole new...
Is that when the great pumpkin rises out of the pumpkin patch
That's
and we
right.
all get Easter candy?
Yeah,
No?
I don't think so.
Oh.
So we've got a lot of great stuff going on. We're getting closer to our Waverly Hills trip. It's here Sunday, the 13th? Sunday the 13th. That should be our new deal. Sunday the 13th of July. And
It's more of a relaxed killing.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've got a couple weeks here before the Waverly Hills trip. I hope that you'll join us out there and have some fun with us as well. We're going to get into tonight's show. You know, Tim, one of my favorite paranormal shows that's kind of come out over the last couple of years has been A Haunting.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, dollar for dollar, that thing scares the crap out of me more than most of the horror movies that have come out in the last few years. The stories, the acting is really good on some of these, and just the creep factor overall. And, you know, a good friend of ours, we just had her out about, 3-4 weeks ago out at Rolling Hills. She came out. She's Stacey Jones, a ghost cop. She's a former police officer. She's a paranormal investigator. And I had the opportunity, as anybody that's watched the show, she's been on 2 episodes, and one deals very personally with her life, and that's what we wanted to talk to her about tonight.
Stacey also, by the way, owns the creepiest EVP I've ever heard in my life.
Really?
Yep. I'll let her talk a little bit more about it. It's pretty long. It's the longest EVP I've ever heard. It's about 20 minutes.
Right. That's the one we heard at our very first Rolling Hills event.
Yep. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that, but let's welcome to the show this evening Ghost Cop Stacey Jones. Good evening, Stacey.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks a lot for joining us here tonight.
No problem.
And I appreciate you coming on. I understand this is a sensitive issue that you had to deal with in your own life. And, you know, we've been friends now for about a year. I've had a chance to talk. You were out at our 2 Rolling Hills events. Fantastic speaker. Everybody's absolutely loved having you be a part of the show with us. And here, you know, I know all this about you. I knew that you were a cop, knew that you were an investigator. And it took watching an episode of A Haunting to find your backstory of what actually happened to you. So I wanted to discuss that on the show and give people a little bit of a background for, you know, others that may not know this about you as well. So let's start off. Give people a quick, brief history of yourself again, so we can catch up the listeners. You're an ex-police officer, correct?
Yeah, I was in law enforcement for about 12 years.
Okay.
Always been interested in the paranormal since I was 6, and wanted to become a parapsychologist. And they didn't offer the programs anymore at colleges, so I decided to become a cop.
Which is pretty close, isn't it?
I've always kept that paranormal interest, but it wasn't something that I openly advertised, because being a female and being a cop and saying that you believed in this would have definitely got me ostracized even worse than I already was.
No doubt. Well, let's discuss a little bit about this now. How long have you actually been a paranormal investigator out and about in the field?
I've been investigating on my own since '82. I started my group in '96, but was doing the paranormal thing about '94. I had a woman that had called that was complaining that she thought there was burglar activity in her house, and we kept going, and there would nothing be there, and she would hear footsteps, and the TV set would turn on. And I was kind of saying to myself in the back of my mind, it sounds like the house is haunted.
Right.
And she was newly divorced with 3 small boys, and we kept going back, and finally after the 4th time, my partner says, don't call us anymore because there's no sign of forced entry, nothing. And the boys are crying, she's crying because they're all scared, and we got in the car, and he looked at me and said, oh, she needs a man, and, blah, 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 blah. And I really honestly thought that the house was haunted. So I went back on my next day off, which was about a week later, and she moved out in the middle of the night.
Really?
And I felt so bad because it was a big financial problem for her to walk out on a lease, newly divorced with 3 small boys. I said, how bad was it for her? And I think she would have been okay if somebody listened.
Mm.
So that was the day I said, no matter what kind of ridicule I'm going to get, I'm going to do something, try to help people at least with that.
No, I totally understand, and that's very admirable. So now, how did this happen with your son? The story basically is that your son Jamie, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You had taken him on a paranormal investigation with you?
Yep. Actually, what had happened was he was in town skateboarding, and I live in a very small rural area outside of Syracuse, and about 6 miles away is a town called Casanova where all of his friends are, and he wanted to go skateboarding with his friends, and I said, that's fine. You got to get back here at dark, and he got back to the park when we had this picnic, and by default, he kind of tagged along going to the cemetery. And we had been to the cemetery one other time before, a couple weeks before, and I ignored those feelings of going back. When we were there about 15 minutes, and we just got a really bad vibe from the place, and we left, and I ignored those feelings. And we had gone with quite a large group, and everything was great. And Jamie and I did get separated. They did portray that right, that we went off on our own, and we were using dowsing rods, and we were kind of trying to see if it actually worked. Because we had talked a couple weeks before. Well, one group brings them in and says, bring me to the Smith tombstone, and it brought them to a Smith tombstone. So we were kind of intrigued by that. And we got separated, and we didn't, and the cemetery, you have to understand, is probably 25 acres. And we got separated, so as a whim, I said to Jamie, let's use the dowsing rods to get us back. And we said to the dowsing rods, bring us back to my investigator, Regina. And it brought us right back, and as we were walking to where they were, that's when we started hearing the footsteps behind us. And we got back with the rest of the group, and they actually heard the footsteps too, because they were looking for somebody behind us, and we didn't see it. And the very next morning is when he woke up, and the star was actually etched into his leg. It wasn't near as bad as it was on the show. I think if he had those kind of scratches, it would have been stitches time, but it seemed like it was like maybe a sharp object was used to etch a star on his leg.
Wow.
And I knew that he didn't do it because it was the outside of a star. It wasn't like, when we're kids and we connect all the lines.
Right.
It was completely it was the outline of a star. So I kind of just went, kind of interesting. And, just like the show, I cleaned it up and just kind of tucked it in the back of my mind. And I talked to John Zaffis later on that day and said, hey, look, this is what happened. And I knew right from the very beginning what had happened. But at that point, I couldn't let him know, just because the more energy that he gives it or I give it would mean that the more reaction and more activity and more torment that he would be put through.
Gotcha.
So basically, it was kind of like we tucked it away, let's see what happens type of deal.
Well, I mean, that's got to be frightening as a mom anyway, right? And especially a mom who's been in law enforcement and is all about to protect and serve. When you see these things and markings starting to appear on your children, which I think is a big fear now for a lot of people that are getting into the paranormal field. Let me ask you, Stacey, as a mom, do you recommend people that have kids getting into this field and really spending a lot of time getting involved in it? Do you think there's any real severe danger that could occur to the children, even if they're not coming with on ghost hunts?
The reason why it was a big debate between my son and my husband and I whether to do the show or not. My son really, really wanted to do the show because he thought that it was necessary to inform people, and that was my viewpoint too, is that with so many people getting into this because they're watching the TV shows, they really don't have a lot of education, and they're not reading and understanding what's going on. I wanted people to understand that, hey, there's dangers in this. I wouldn't necessarily say as a mom not to do it, because if you take the right precautions, I think everybody's pretty much safe.
And what do you feel are the right precautions now that
I think the precaution is that you've got to come in and you've got to, whatever your religion is you've got to go in with protection, that you've got to ask for protection when you go do these things. And I think the most important fact of all is that you've got to trust your gut instinct. And that was something I did not trust. I just blew it off saying, it was my overactive imagination going into this place, despite all the reports I got before that. The reason why we picked that particular cemetery was because I was getting email after email about this specific cemetery, and I'm saying to myself, they just want to go into the cemetery because they want to be scared, and they make themselves scared, and there's really nothing going on in the cemetery.
Well, and I'm interested with that too. Let's sidetrack for just a second. There's such a heavy debate about investigating cemeteries. First of all, is it disrespectful to the dead to be there? And second of all, why in God's green earth would a spirit hang out in a cemetery? I would think that'd be the last place on the planet.
I used to think that too. Back in '95, when I first started getting into this, I knew a lot of people that were going into cemeteries and getting results, and I'm saying to myself, well, why? If I'm dead, I'm not going to want to hang out in a cemetery.
Right.
And we started going to the cemetery. It's been like 13 years now, to a cemetery that hasn't been used since the 1900s. And very first time we got an EVP, and we keep going back. And now in this cemetery, we get EVP about 99% of the time. And
wow.
I think it's like talking to Mark and Debbie that you've got to establish a relationship.
And you're talking, for the listeners, Mark and Debbie Constantino are a few EVP specialists that we have at our events who have miraculous ability of getting incredibly insane EVPs just about everywhere they go.
Right. And I, and working on that theory of establishing a relationship to the point where, we go to this cemetery, they're calling us by name right when we turn the recorders on. And I'm, still I can't figure out why specifically that cemetery, where I have a cemetery 2 blocks from my house, we get absolutely nothing there. So that kind of brings me to, is it something like chemistry? Is it something with the land? Is it, I just...
That's what I was just going to say. Maybe what you should do is talk to the local city there, see if they know. Usually they have survey plots and information. Maybe there's a high level of limestone or something underneath that area that may be, just allowing themselves to, maybe it is trapping the energies there.
Right.
Or at least strengthening or boosting it. I often wonder if it's not so much that it's trapping, but it creates such a boost in energy with the crystals or the type of ground that it is, that it allows for the spirits or entities to actually you kind of plug into it and make themselves seen or heard more.
Right. You're talking 12 years ago when I first started the group. I had 10 houses that came in 1 year where they were brand spanking new houses and they were haunted.
Wow.
And, every single one I went to was, it's my house is built on ancient Indian burial ground. And, and of course, what I did was got a hold of the Native American Council of New York, because the area I'm in are very high Native American lands.
Right.
And said, is there any truth to this? And they said, absolutely not, because the Onondaga Nation, the Oneida Nation, and the Mohawk Nation, which is very high concentration, they all cremated their dead and put the dead into burial mounds, which are still in the area and considered historic landmarks. So that's not the issue.
Okay.
So, so basically what we did was we just kind of said it's got to do something to do with the land. It's got to do something to do with the people, and I think most importantly, the people who are in the house. And we kind of came up and said, we think this is the reason why. Why else would it be?
Well, that's true.
So, so we kind of applied this to the cemetery down the road, and, we go there at least twice a month just to see, what we can get and what they're talking to us about. We actually go in asking specific questions to their families after we've done research. They won't answer it, but if we talk about our everyday stuff, they've got all sorts of stuff to say.
Well, now,
so is it necessarily them buried in the cemetery? I don't think so.
What do you feel? Now, is this the same cemetery where you're getting all the action? Is that the same cemetery that you'd taken Jamie to investigate?
No, this is a different cemetery.
Okay.
And like I said, we'd only been there twice, and, I ignored the feelings. There was people that had been in the week before and actually got an EVP that said, yo, faggots, get out, the devil practices here.
Wow.
And I found that out after this whole thing had gone down with Jamie. So, so we took him to the cemetery. We thought, okay, things are good. We got a little scratches, but, we kind of took one step at a time. And in the show, they took things out of context. He got the star first, and then 2 days later, he was standing in the kitchen looking at the calendar and started screaming and pulled his shirt up, and that's when the scratches appeared on his back and his front. And they showed right in front of me. I mean, he lifted his shirt up, and they were just showing right in front of me. And so, of course, now I'm trying to calm him down. He's wondering what's going on. I'm not saying anything at this point because I know, and that I just basically wanted to keep him calm, because the more excited he got, the more it was going to be active for him. So I just downplayed it a lot, got on the phone with John Zaffis and said, okay, now we're not just getting scratches on his legs. They're appearing on his front and his back, which came at a really bad time because John had just hit the road and was doing the lecture thing at this point, and he was gone. So, so basically it was an everyday thing where, Jamie was good for about a month. He, went back into school, and then his behavior at school just completely shot down. And I'm saying to myself, okay, what is going on here? My husband's telling me that it's typical 14-year-old behavior. And, after being with his son and hearing his things that he did at the age of 14, I'm going, okay, maybe you're right. Jamie, he's a good kid. He doesn't do this kind of stuff. But after hearing what they did at the age of 14, I'm considering myself lucky. So, basically, things went down in school to the beginning of October, where he actually would come in the door, and he wouldn't even be in the house 5 minutes, and he sent up to his room because of his bad attitude.
Okay.
And it was just very out of character for him. It wasn't your normal 14-year-old stuff. It was just very out of character, because when I catch him doing something, his face just tells it all. And I would catch him doing stuff, and he would look at me like, what am I talking about? That never happened. Why are you yelling at me?
Okay.
And it progressed slowly to the point where they had their first break from school, and they had a parent-teacher conference. That day, I got a phone call from every single one of his teachers, including his art teacher, who he just absolutely loved, and that was his favorite class. Our teacher called me up and said, look, I don't say this. I've been teaching for 18 years, but I hate your son.
Wow.
And I'm dumbfounded, because this is his art teacher he's had for years. And I went, excuse me? She goes, I don't know what it is. He comes into my room. She says, I can't stand him. I hate him.
Wow.
And I'm dumbfounded. What am I supposed to say to this? And I kind of said, look, I said, what? What is it? And she goes, he gets in a room, and she said, she said, he drains me. And that was the truth, because he would get home from school, whether he was good or not, he was sent up to his room, because I couldn't even be in the same room with him, because it was like a constant draining of your energy, and that's the only way I could describe it. And so I'm talking to John about this. John's going, okay, something's not right here. We got to get him down here. He's gone, all over the country. So basically it was a kind of grin and bear it situation.
And John Zaffis, for our listeners that may not be familiar, John is a demonologist who's worked in the field for about 35 years under the tutelage of his aunt and uncle, Lorraine and Ed Warren. And John, in his own right, is extremely good at what he does as a demonologist, and has been called in on many cases when things start to get kind of aggressive. And when you start getting scratches on your child, that was about the time that you called John in. Is that right?
I called John the very first day, right after we went to that cemetery. When the star showed up on his leg, I was on the phone with John.
Well, let's take a quick break here, Stacey, and we'll come back and have you finish up your story. You're listening to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show with our guest, Ghost Cop Stacey Jones.
Once you have seen Dave and Tim in the light, you'll understand why we must return to the darkness on the edge of town. Stay tuned. There is more to come. If you bleed from the ears while listening to Leo Sayer records, would it qualify as a paranormal experience? I thought so. Welcome back to the darkness on the edge of town. Ooh, that hurts.
Good evening. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio. Our guest this evening is Stacey Jones. Stacey, do you have a website people can go to if they're having paranormal problems in New York, that they're looking for help, and they could get your team?
Yeah, it's Got Ghosts, like Got Milk.
Okay.
GotGhosts.org.
GotGhosts.org. All right, and people can go there. Now, you also have a link over at MySpace, too. Is that correct?
Yep, Stacey Jones Ghost Cop. It's Stacey with an E-Y.
So it's STACEYJONES Ghost Cop, and that's myspace.com/Stacey Jones Ghost Cop, correct?
Yep.
All right, so now let's continue the story with Jamie. You had these appear on him, the scratches started appearing on him. Now, let me ask you real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What do you... I mean, we know TV is about entertainment. Out of the A Haunting episode, I mean, it looked terrifying through this entire thing, and it was like you said, the tears were so deep that you would have thought that he would have needed stitches, according to the TV show. I mean, how much of the show was dead on with the reality of what actually occurred?
Well, the facts were basically the same.
Okay.
The fact that I didn't know was going to take too long to put into the episode, so they basically left it like I was clueless.
Okay.
It wasn't nearly as dramatic. I mean, I watched the show the first time it aired, and I was like, "Those poor people," and it was me. It wasn't nearly as dramatic. The exorcism, he was not growling like a cat. He wasn't thrashing about. He didn't do any of that. The behavior was basically the same. But the things did fly through the house. The book did go flying through the stairs. And there was things that happened that, to me, was more terrifying that they chose not to put into the show.
Okay,
and
what other things were more terrifying to you that weren't in the show? What did you...
Well, going into October, I was a full-time college student. I was working, it was my mid-semester, and I was taking some night classes, and I would get panic phone calls from him in the middle of class, him screaming that there was somebody running around the house knocking on the outside of the house. And, I'm 35 miles away in the middle of a class, and he's screaming, and I could hear it in the background. I could hear the tappings on the windows. I could hear all this. So, I would hang up the phone and call one of the neighbors and get over there, and there's nobody there. And, and this happened a couple times.
God,
where,
as a parent, I just cringe at the mere thought of having to deal with that. I can't even begin to.
So meanwhile, Jamie's here by himself, and that's when a lot of times the activity would flare up, but not to the point of being real super obvious.
Right.
We had the tappings around the house. He did hear the lip smacking. That was something that was very prominent, and he spent a lot of time in his room. Basically because he was sent there all the time.
Right.
And, my husband works nights, so he would take off at 7:30 at night, and, I wouldn't get home till about 10 o'clock at night, so there was that 2.5-hour gap that he was here alone. So this is all going on, and then at this point, I'm doing a big show in Syracuse, New York, and I'm gone a lot of the times getting ready for that show. And I come home after the show about 3 in the morning, and this was, mid-October, and all the lights are on in the house. And I said, uh-oh, that's always my indication that something happened.
Right.
So I come home, and I go into his room, and the lights are all on. I said, hey, what's up? And he just looked at me. He goes, you didn't talk to Lloyd? And I said, no. He goes, maybe you should talk to Lloyd. And that's so unlike him. Just the way, it was like a very smarmy way that he said it. So I traipse downstairs, and I call my husband, and he's like, did you talk to Jamie? And I said, no. He goes, well, there was an accident today. And I said, well, what kind of accident? Well, he was skateboarding in town with a friend of his, and the friend had stopped short because something black. He said it was not an animal. It was not anything specific. Something had darted in front of him, and Jamie stopped short on the skateboard, and he fell through a plate glass window.
Oh, my gosh.
And so, of course, I'm saying to myself, you know, you're skateboarding on a sidewalk. How stupid's that? So I go up and I yank him out of bed. I'm screaming at him at 3 o'clock in the morning going, what a stupid way to die.
Right.
You know, and I'm only thinking of, you know, you were skateboarding on the sidewalk. How dumb was that? And he just stood there, and he's like, you don't understand, you don't understand. I said, what's not to understand? You fell through a plate glass window. And, you know, after yelling at him for about 20 minutes, he says, Mom, listen to me, you don't understand. And I said, what? He said, I saw your grandmother in the window before I fell through. And I said, what do you mean? And he described my grandmother to a T, which he did see. He did meet her when he was younger, but he really never knew her because she was in a nursing home for years and years and didn't know anybody. And I said, okay, so you saw great grandma. What's the deal? He says, no. He says, she was wearing this pin. And I said, what was the pin? And it was a key. And that was something that my grandmother always wore, and it was something for the Eastern Star, the branch of the Masons there, which he never knew about. So, of course, I'm taking comfort in that, saying, okay, my grandmother saved his life.
Right.
And I talked to the people who own the store that he fell through this plate glass window, and the woman says, I don't understand how he didn't die. Because there was just great big 3-foot shards of glass surrounding him, and he was unscathed. So I got on the phone with John, and I said, you know, hey, it was a lucky break. I said, you know, my grandmother must have been there to help him, and John's going, no, I don't think so. So, you know, now we're going into October. After this, it just basically everything hit the fan. And now he's getting into fights into school, and, you know, I've got every teacher calling me. He's getting suspended. He's coming home, and not only is he giving us problems at home, now I'm starting to get the paranormal activity at home. Mm. And my husband, who's a complete non-believer, starts telling me things that he's experiencing. And, you know, I find it odd that, you know, my husband still is just this anomaly I just can't figure out, but he'll tell me these things, and he's adamant that they happen. You know, like he came home from work one day, and he heard Jamie up in his bedroom walking around and go to the bathroom and the door shut at 5 in the morning. So my husband's livid going, you know, he's not supposed to be up for another hour and a half. Waits and waits and waits, goes upstairs, starts yelling at Jamie, opens up the door, there's nobody there. So, you know, and for this to be experienced with my husband's pretty radical, because he's one of those people that he doesn't believe in this, and he'd rather keep it that way.
Right.
And, you know, and then, you know, Jamie would come home, and we would start, you know, screaming and fighting with him, and, you know, the book came flying down the stairs. My husband stood right there and watched that, too. And, you know, so I'm saying to myself, okay, now we've got all this stuff going on. Maybe it is poltergeist activity. That was something that, you know, they did put in the show. I was seriously thinking about it. And now at this point, I can't even get a hold of John Zaffis because it's so close to Halloween. He's in a different city every day, so I'm basically dealing with everything that's going on.
Right.
So this is the way it went for about 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks, until he got back from the major lecturing. I get a hold of John and say, okay, you know, things haven't changed. Things have been kind of, you know, just the way they are. You know, he's got another, like, 2 weeks before he gets back from his lecturing, and then we hit Thanksgiving, and then we got the holidays. Now, at this point, I noticed that I'm starting to have some changes, too. And, you know, John's calling me from the road, and I'm saying to John, I was like, I want out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to leave. I don't want to be with the husband. I don't want to be with Jamie. And you know, I just want to leave. And John's like, what are you talking about? And I said, you just don't understand. I just don't. And you know, my personality started changing too. And I really didn't notice it because I was saying it's the stress of everything that was going on.
Right.
So finally, John gets back, and we made the arrangements to go down and get the exorcism done. We went down to Connecticut, went to Larry and Debbie's house.
Now, had John interviewed Jamie? Did he?
Yeah,
think...
well, he was on the phone quite a bit with Jamie.
Okay.
And you know, that's the one great thing about John is you know, we have always been treated like family with John. And he would get on the phone with Jamie, and you know, Jamie just had, and they portrayed this very well in the show, just this feeling of nothing. There was no emotion anywhere. I mean, I couldn't get a reaction out of this kid if I tried. And the straw that broke the camel's back was going into his room and finding my diamond earrings, the report card, and a whole plethora of other things that they didn't mention in the show. And
what was with the earrings? Explain that to us.
He basically went through my jewelry box and took everything that was anything of value.
Okay.
And, I couldn't find these things, and, I'm not the most organized person. I'm kind of the ones that I squirrel things away and find them, hey, look, there's my earrings I was looking for. But I noticed that everything was just missing from my jewelry box. And, of course, being busy with school and everything else, I just, hey, have you guys seen it? No, haven't seen it, And went into his room and basically opened up, and there's his report cards, there's notices from school, there's my jewelry, and all this other stuff. And I come flying down the stairs. My husband's there, and I'm ready to have. Dory goes, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to get Jamie out of school, and I am going to kill him." And that was not kidding. I was ready to pull him out and just literally go beat this kid down in the school parking lot. Right. That's how angry I was. And my husband's like, "Maybe you should wait for him to get home." So he did. He came home, and literally he walked in the door, and I just started chucking things at him, saying, "Go pack your stuff. You're going to live with your dad."
Wow.
And, he has no relationship with his real father, and at this point, I didn't care.
Right.
And he
more
came
you
in
just
and
needed him out of there.
Yeah,
Okay.
And he took one look at me, and he said, "Is this really what you want?" And I said, "This is really what I want. I can't even be in the same house with you anymore." And, my husband's like, "Boy, you're just being a little overreactive about this." And I said, "Not for nothing, but no." I just, the personality change was so drastic in such short amount of time, I could not account that this was 14-year-old behavior. Sorry, I couldn't do it.
Right.
So basically, we went down and walking up to the house to get the exorcism, at that point, I was very, and despite how good of friends John and I were at that point, I was very leery about the whole exorcism thing. Because my point is that I don't think that everything in the world is a demon. I don't think everything in the world is a negative. And this is something John and I would get in very healthy debates about. But my point is whether this ritual is going to be an actual religious ceremony or a placebo effect, it didn't make a difference because it was going to help Jamie.
Right.
So we walked in to do the exorcism, and, Larry started the exorcism. And Jamie's a big kid. At 14 years old, he was 6 foot.
Wow.
And Larry's a little guy. And when Larry started with the exorcism, he would come near Jamie with the crucifix. And I saw Jamie's face change to like, oh my gosh, he's going to pick Larry up and throw him across the room. But he didn't. But this was what Jamie's face was every time he got close with the crucifix. He did 2 exorcisms. After the second exorcism, we were sitting in the room, and it was not just the 5 of us. It was another person was in there. After the exorcism was done the second time, we actually saw a black form leave behind Jamie, crawl up the wall, and actually exit out the back of the house.
Oh, good grief!
And that's when I sat and looked at it and went, okay, this isn't placebo effect. That was real. That was something to that.
Yeah.
And he immediately just took one look at Debbie and was apologizing profusely, and he just repeated it over and over. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she didn't understand why, and we didn't either, because we basically got in the car and we left. And Jamie had all sorts of questions for John, but it wasn't the right time to ask. So, he finally said the next day going back home, he's like, he said, I need to call Debbie when we get back. And I said, well, why? And he said, because I need to apologize to her again. I said, for what? And he says, for making her cry. And we said, what are you talking about? He said, I made her cry. He said, every time Larry came near me, he says, my thoughts made her cry because I hated him so much. And we kept trying to tell him, no, that didn't happen. It didn't happen. He said, yes, it did. And come to find out, there was other things that had happened during this couple-month period that he even stopped telling me about because I just basically was shutting him off because I was so afraid of the activity getting worse, where he told me on the way home that he woke up in the middle of the night and saw me hanging in his bedroom.
Oh, good God.
With a note around my neck that said, you know why. so I was blown away by this, and I went, "Oh my God!" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You were wearing that nightgown." And I said, "What nightgown?" He goes, "You know that nightgown that has the little elephants on it?" And that one blew me away because he actually picked that out for me when he was 2 years old. And I never wore the nightgown because it was so ratty and torn, but I saved it because I could just remember his little blonde head coming up and saying, "Mom, you have to buy this."
Right.
He didn't even know I had the nightgown. And I found that very odd that they would choose to put me in that nightgown to scare him like that. So, so all these things started kind of coming together afterwards, and we went back, and literally the next day he was back to the way Jamie was 6 months before that.
Well, we're going to take a quick break here, Stacey, and then we'll wrap up your story on the last 10 minutes of the show. You're listening to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. And remember, if you'd like more information or you'd like to contact Stacey and learn more about her organization, you can go to gotghosts.org.
The New York Times has raved about the show. The Star Tribune says it's paranormally funny. And the Biscayne Bugle said, how could they put this crap on the air and live with themselves?
I am so sorry for everything that has happened. Because in spite of what Mike says now, it is my fault. Because it was my project. Everything had to be my way. And this is where we've ended up.
Stay tuned. There's more to come from the Darkness on the Edge of Town. When Dave was a young boy, he once awoke to find himself staring directly into the eyes of a shadow person. Turns out it was just his life-size cardboard cutout of Donny Osmond.
Go away, little girl. Go away, little girl.
Welcome back to the Darkness on the Edge of Town.
I'm Dave Schrader, the host of Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. With me, as always, my faithful and loving companion, Tonto.
Oh.
If you have a paranormal story that you want to share, if you've had experiences that you think are important and you'd like to share with our listeners, you can always reach out to Dave or Tim at dave@darknessradio.com or tim@darknessradio.com. Tell us your story in an email. Let us know about it. If you have evidence to support your story, pictures, EVPs, eyewitness accounts, blood dripping off your walls, toilets that float on their own, let us know. We'd love to have you on the show and discuss those cases. If you have an active haunting and you're afraid, let us know, because we do have help. We do have people that we can help you get in touch with. Yes, Tim?
Does my toilet clogging on a regular basis qualify as paranormal?
Not so much. When you eat crack chicken all the time, that's going to happen.
All right.
We're going to go back to our guest tonight is Ghost Cop Stacey Jones. And again, if you have troubles and you're in the New York area looking for a paranormal investigative team, one of the best teams out there, you can visit with our good friend Miss Jones by going to gotghosts.org to get more information. We're going to wrap up with Stacey's story. We've got about 12 minutes left on the show here, Stacey. So you took your son in for an exorcism, and I've got to assume, I mean, how surreal is that? To have to face taking your son in for an exorcism. And did you believe, or did John or the priest that did this believe that it was demonic, or did they believe it was just a really pissed off, malevolent spirit that was kind of affecting him?
As John said, it wasn't a possession, it was an attachment.
Okay.
And I had a hard time understanding what exactly was meant. John would explain it, and I think because John and I are so similar that I just wanted to hear what I wanted to hear. That, it's just basically, a little spirit friend that just hangs around Jamie and is causing havoc. That's kind of what I assumed it was. And basically, I found out afterwards, and this happened after the exorcism, was I had gotten a new member in my group who was actually a very gifted psychic. And we had gotten together, and he did not join the group as a psychic capacity. He just wanted to become, paranormal investigator. And I was teaching him how to upload EVPs on the computer, and he's just staring at Jamie and wouldn't let it go. So finally he said to Jamie, can you give us a few minutes? Jamie took off, and he said, there's something that's just attached to Jamie. And I kind of looked at him because he knew nothing about this. And I said, excuse me? He said, there is something attached to Jamie, and I'm not liking it too much. So I freaked out. I called John up, and I said, John, what's going on here? And he says, I told you. I said, you told me what? That basically, when this happens, that it's something that is, as John explains it, something that is waiting for an opportune time to become more integrated with Jamie. And despite what the show portrayed, that the dowsing rods and us using the dowsing rods was the culprit to what happened, in actuality, what happened was this was sent to him. And I can't get into details of who, why, or when, or where, but basically what happened was that, Jamie and I went back down to John's just a couple weeks later, and he needed another exorcism. Kind of a tune-up, to say. And
Okay.
that finally got rid of what was around him. But basically, it's just something that will try to convince Jamie that the certain behaviors are normal, and would whisper to Jamie, and Jamie, said this afterwards, that, when we were filming for the episode, that they would constantly whisper to him and tell him that, the behaviors that he's doing is completely normal, and that was the feeling of nothingness came from, too. And come to find out, that was actually the attachment's name, supposedly was this, it meant nothingness. So, that was something that was very, just really concerning me, because I thought, hey, exorcism's done, everything's great, he's back to normal, and, we need to have a little tune-up afterwards. So it's something that I always keep an eye on, especially with him. He does not go on ghost hunts. It was not a regular thing with him. He didn't go to ghost hunts on a regular basis.
How old is Jamie now?
He's 17 now.
So this was about 3 years ago that
Yep.
the events of this took place. How soon after the exorcisms did you see that he switched?
Immediately. Absolutely, totally immediately. He looked at me, and of course, he was apologizing profusely to Debbie. Just, I'm so sorry. But he looked at me, and, for literally 2 hours after this exorcism, he was apologizing for every single thing that he did, that he didn't find he did anything wrong with, and realized after the exorcism, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry, I took your jewelry. And he just listed this whole litany of stuff that he had done and stuff that I didn't even know he did. And he was like, it was like this realization that, whatever was there just kind of released, and he understood that, the things that are going on wasn't right.
Wow.
And the next day home, he slept most of the way home, but he would actually wake up on the way home, look at me and go, you remember when I did this? Yeah, I'm so sorry. It was so wrong. To the point, it was like, Jamie, it's done and over with. It's done. It's okay.
Did he feel, does he remember these things occurring as himself, or did he feel disconnected from it, like he was outside watching it happen?
He said he felt very disconnected. And he said that he was getting in trouble constantly. It was, if it was school, it was home, it was everywhere. And he felt very disconnected for it, and he felt no responsibility for anything. He said he knew he did it. He said he had no, he said, I knew everything. I knew everything I was doing, but he said there was no discernment whether it was right or wrong.
Right.
And, he said it was a constant bombardment of basically what choice you're going to do. He always picked the wrong one, and there was no consequence to it.
Oh, gotcha.
And, and what got me was his grade shot right down. I mean, this kid was failing everything right up until he got the exorcism, and then his grade shot right back up. The one teacher that actually called up to said that he hated Jamie actually quit her job over Christmas vacation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because of the whole situation?
I don't know. I never talked to her. I never did find out. The principal and the vice principal of the school, who were constantly on the phone with me, called me up immediately after, the Christmas break and said, boy, we don't know what you did over Christmas break, but the kid's 100% better.
That's great.
And, grade shot up, and he was right back to his normal self. And I still had some paranormal activity in the house, and then got a house clearing, and things got better after that.
Well, what do you recommend for people that are getting involved in the paranormal field? What do you recommend people do to make sure to protect themselves and their family from these type of things going on?
I think it's most important that I don't care what religion you are, you have to have a belief system. I'm not saying it has to be in God. It could be in Allah. It could be in Buddha. It could be the belief in yourself. That belief system, I think, is most important. And to hold that belief system as part of your protection when you go and do investigations and you go to these places, you know, I'm one that right from the very beginning, if anything was remotely negative in any kind of an investigation, I didn't take that case on. I always referred it out to Ed and Lorraine and John because
Right.
I felt that I was never qualified enough because I don't know enough to go in and take care of a situation like this. And even now, 12 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. And my point is that people have got to at least do some reading to know what these warning signs are and to protect yourself no matter where you go. So, you know, I have actually 3 ministers in my group now that work with me and work with the group about, you know, you may not have a religious system, but you've got to protect yourself in some way.
Gotcha.
And for God's sakes, listen to those gut instincts. And that was something that was 100% my fault because I just blew it off. I was like, okay, yeah, we got a bad feeling last time. It was my imagination. Let's go back again and let's bring the 14-year-old.
Wow. Well, hopefully people will learn from that experience in itself, from your challenges, that, you know, it's definitely something. How old do you think people should be before they start trying to get involved in the paranormal field and investigate?
I think it should be at least, you know, I hate to put like a legal age at 18, but I think you should be at least in your early 20s, if not a little bit older. You know, depending on how you're grounded and how your belief systems are and, you know, your protection and everything else. I've got people that join my group that are, you know, 18, they're great. I don't have a problem with them. I've got some other ones that are 23, 24, and their head's just not in the right place. And I think that you have to, and it really is key that you've got to have the right sense and the right mind to do this, where if you're doing this for research and you're doing it to find answers, I think that's a great thing. But if you're doing it for the entertainment factor, that you want to be scared, that you're conjuring, you're doing these things, I don't think it's the right place to be. And I think that's key where, you know, if you're curious about things and you want to learn about things, that's fine. But you better find out what your motive is first. And I know John specifically, his son was about 19 years old before he actually went on his first ghost hunt because, you know, John's seen the worst of what's out there, and I think he's got the right idea.
Yeah. You know, that's one thing that we run into at our events. People want to bring their children because they want to meet Jay and Grant and Chris and Patrick and the TV celebs and hang out. And, you know, I usually will let them bring their kids into, like, the autograph session and the meet and greet. But they almost get mad at me that I don't want to include them on the ghost hunts.
I think it's irresponsible. I can't tell you the amount of people that emailed me after the show and said, hey, I'm not going to bring my 6 and 8-year-old ghost hunting anymore.
Right.
And to me, that made my skin crawl. You're going to bring a 6-year-old? Oh.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I brought Jamie to cemeteries, not specifically ghost hunting. You know, I did a photo shoot in one time when he was like 6 years old, and that poor kid was traumatized just being in the cemetery.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine doing ghost hunting. And it's something that kids just don't understand. How are you going to try to explain that the EVP that you're getting is the disembodied voice of a spirit? Kind of scary for a 6-year-old.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you know, now let me talk to you, too, because Tim alluded to this at the beginning of the show. He was talking about the fact that you got one of the creepiest EVPs he's ever heard. Tell us a little bit about the story behind that investigation and the EVP that you got.
It was a hotel. I can't disclose its location. It was a hotel located in New York. Probably the most haunted place I've ever been to. The activity was blatant. We had 14 people there. The activity was going on in front of all of us. A good example was about 3 o'clock in the morning, it sounded like there was a physical fight going on. And we stood there, and we couldn't see anything, but we physically, you know, heard 2 men arguing, and we heard one guy push another guy down the stairs, and we heard the door open and shut, and there was nothing in front of us. And the next day, a bunch of us had gone out of the hotel to go get some food, and 4 of my investigators stayed. They heard activity up on the 3rd floor, so they sat on the 2nd floor steps, and there was 3 recorders going at the time, and we actually caught this EVP where it sounds like there's a woman being raped and murdered. And the EVP is very noisy, and I just have to say that this EVP, the only thing that was heard during this time, this 20 minutes, was their very soft conversation and the ticking of a clock. The rest of the noise that's in the EVP is actually an EVP.
And that was all the screaming and the
Right.
crazy noises. Yeah, that was a freaky EVP.
I actually just got the EVP cleaned. I took it to a sound engineer, and just a couple weeks ago, and he cleaned it, and we're finding things in this EVP we never even knew were there before.
Wow.
Which is kind of scary. There's actually, it sounds like there's 4 or 5 different conversations going on at one time, all on different frequencies. Like one frequency, you can hear 2 African American men talking about how they're going to go to Burger King. And then on another one, you hear a woman and a child talking, and it was like each layer had different conversations going on at the same time with the other EVP going on at the same time, too.
Tim, let me ask you then, as an audio engineer and doing what you do for the stations and understanding RF frequency and understanding the things like that real quick, I know we only have about 30 seconds left. Does that sound to you like maybe the recorder's picking up transmissions from cell phones and communicators and things like that more often?
I'd have to hear it more. I don't know. Especially the separated parts.
All right, if they're getting like conversations about going to Burger King and everything, to me that sounds like bleed over.
There are things in the EVP itself that couldn't possibly be a transmission, especially or a cross signal. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to talk about it. But
yeah, the EVP was recorded between the frequency of 8,500 and 15.5.
Wow.
And I have not found anything that is on that same frequency, despite all the phone calls I made to try to figure out where the heck that frequency was coming from.
I understand. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening, and I'm glad to know that things are back to normal with your son and you. And again, for anybody that's interested in reaching out to you or getting help in the New York area, they can reach you at gotghosts.org, correct?
Yep.
All right, Stacey, thanks again. We look forward to having you at more of our events. You're a great speaker, a great person. We appreciate having you as a friend of the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot, Stacey. Take care and give our best to Jamie.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in to the Darkness on the Edge of Town Paranormal Radio Show. Stick with us. We're going to talk about the year 2013. Is the world going to end in 2012? We're going to talk to author Marie D. Jones, who is the author of a new book on 2013. She's going to let us know what her thoughts are coming up. So stay tuned with us. We'll be right back with more after this.